The Zyronians had never known defeat, a race of relentless hunters. They were known across the galaxy for their meticulous precision, their cold detachment, and their unparalleled ability to track and neutralize any threat. To them, no being was beyond their grasp, no target too elusive. When they turned their attention to Earth, a planet teeming with violent criminals and warlords, they saw it as just another hunting ground. The humans, however, would prove far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. On Earth, the criminals captured by the Zyronians were no ordinary men. They were leaders of the most fearsome gangs, warlords who had once commanded entire nations, and terrorists who reveled in chaos. Among the most notorious was Viktor Kalashnikov, a former general turned merciless kingpin who ruled over a sprawling criminal empire with an iron fist. Kalashnikov was a man whose name alone sent shivers down the spines of the most hardened soldiers. He had orchestrated coups, masterminded genocides, and led wars that left entire continents in ruin. To the Zyronians, he was a prime prize, a trophy to be displayed as evidence of their superiority. Next was Carlos, the executioner Delgado, a former mercenary whose cold-blooded assassinations had earned him the reputation of a living legend. His skills in combat were unmatched, and his ability to take down his targets with surgical precision had made him the most feared man on Earth. He had no allegiance, no moral compass. The Zyronians had come to know him through intercepted communications and intelligence reports. His ruthlessness made him a perfect candidate for their collection. Then there was Elias Moro, a military strategist whose knowledge of warfare was legendary. Once a brilliant officer, Moro had been driven mad by the atrocities he had witnessed in his career, becoming the leader of a group of anarchists hell-bent on bringing the world to its knees. He had masterminded countless attacks, each one more devastating than the last. The Zyronians saw him as a threat to their plans, a mind that could unravel entire galaxies if left unchecked. The Zyronians' arrival on Earth was swift and overwhelming. Their ships, sleek and silent, descended upon the planet without warning. Their advanced technology allowed them to neutralize Earth's defenses before they even had a chance to respond. Military bases were obliterated in seconds, cities were crippled under the weight of their weapons, and the world's government stood powerless in the face of such overwhelming force. In a matter of days, the most dangerous criminals on Earth were captured. Kalashnikov, Delgado, and Moro, along with dozens of other infamous figures, were imprisoned aboard the Zyronian vessel, a ship so vast it could house an entire civilization. The Zyronians' method of capturing criminals was clinical and efficient. There were no negotiations, no mercy. Anyone who resisted was either swiftly eliminated or rendered unconscious and placed in stasis pods for transport. But it was not just these men who were captured. The Zyronians were thorough, scouring the planet for any potential threat. They sought out warlords, mob bosses, and even psychopathic cult leaders who had managed to evade Earth's justice system. Each one was brought aboard the ship, their fates sealed by their own actions. The Zyronians believed they had the situation under control. Their technology was beyond anything Earth had ever seen, and the criminals they had gathered were no match for their advanced weaponry. Among the captives, however, was a figure whose presence went unnoticed at first. Deep within the ship's securest holding cell, in a chamber shielded from all external monitoring, sat a figure who had been sealed away for eons. To the Zyronians, he was just another criminal, one they had no understanding of. This was not a mere human warlord or a terrorist mastermind. This was something far older, far more dangerous. This was Death. The entity known as Death had once been imprisoned by an ancient civilization that had feared its power. It had been sealed in a forgotten corner of the universe, a place so remote that even the most advanced beings had trouble finding it. The Zyronians, in their arrogance, had stumbled upon his prison and unwittingly freed him. They had no idea what they had done. Death was no ordinary being. He had no form, no true shape. He was the embodiment of all things that ended, the force that took life and sowed decay. His power was not something that could be contained by technology, and it was not something that could be understood by even the most advanced minds. He had existed before the Zironians, before the Earth itself. And now, for the first time in millennia, he was free. The Zironians placed Death in a stasis field, convinced that their technology could keep him contained. They had no idea that such measures would be futile. While the criminals they had captured struggled against their restraints, Death lay still, his consciousness slowly stirring. The power that had once shaken entire worlds was beginning to wake. The Zironian crew went about their duties, unaware that the most dangerous entity in existence was aboard their ship. They busied themselves with cataloging their prisoners, marveling at the value of their bounty. To them, capturing these villains was a triumph, a testament to their superiority. They never once considered that their own arrogance had sealed their doom. The criminals aboard the ship were placed in cells designed to hold even the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. Kalashnikov, Delgado, and Morrow found themselves confined to isolated chambers, their powerlessness in the face of the Zironians' technology a bitter irony. But as the days passed, the realization began to dawn on them that they were not simply prisoners. They were trophies, gathered together in a ship of unimaginable power, with no hope of escape. As the Zironian vessel traveled deeper into the galaxy, Death's presence began to grow. The ship's systems faltered. Its energy reserves fluctuated erratically, and strange occurrences began to disrupt the crew. But the Zironians, too confident in their technology, dismissed these signs as glitches. They had no idea that they were harboring a force capable of ending them all. What the Zironians did not realize, what they could not know, was that the universe was about to change. The balance of power was about to shift, and they would be the first to fall. Death was stirring, and with him, the end of everything. The Zironian vessel, a sleek colossus of advanced technology, cut through the void of space with quiet precision. Its hull gleamed in the starlight, a symbol of the Zironians' unmatched capabilities. The captured criminals, now imprisoned aboard the ship, remained oblivious to the brewing storm within the deepest cell. To the Zironians, the mission had been a triumph. They had gathered Earth's most dangerous men, individuals whose violent legacies threatened their galaxy, and yet, as they celebrated their success, they had unwittingly released an ancient evil beyond comprehension. Death had been sealed away for millennia, forgotten by the vast majority of the universe. He was an entity, not of flesh, but of essence, a force of nature too potent for any civilization to understand or control. His prison had been designed by ancient beings, those who had known that some powers could never be controlled, only contained. And so, when the Zironians discovered his prison and mistakenly released him, they had no idea of the threat they had unleashed. The stasis field, a device meant to contain his form, had only delayed the inevitable. It was only a matter of time before Death's true nature began to stir. The first sign came as a flicker, unnoticed by the ship's crew. A malfunction in one of the power conduits, a flickering light in the lower decks. The Zironian engineers dismissed it as a routine glitch, something their systems could handle with ease. But soon, it became clear that the ship was reacting to something far more dangerous than a mere technical fault. In the depths of the ship, the one still form of Death began to awaken. He could not be contained by walls, by metal, by technology. He was neither bound nor confined by the physical laws that governed other beings. His power seeped into the ship's systems like a poison, corrupting its functions, bending them to his will. The stasis field that had once held him was now useless, and the Zironians' advanced technology faltered under the weight of his presence. The ship's alarms blared, but the crew did not understand the cause. They had never known Death. How could they? Death's first movement was subtle. A shift of energy here, a sudden pulse of cold there. He spread like a shadow across the ship, unseen, unfelt by the Zironian crew. But the effects were undeniable. The ship's control systems began to malfunction, and within moments, the entire security grid collapsed. Death had no need for weapons or tools. His mere existence was enough to unravel the systems meant to hold him in place. One by one, The crew members in charge of monitoring the prisoners felt it. The sudden drop in temperature, the sharp sting of suffocating darkness, the sense that something had shifted. When they entered the containment room to check on the prisoners, they found nothing but the remains of their colleagues. There was no sign of struggle, no evidence of a fight. It was as if the very life had been drained from them, their bodies left cold and lifeless. The Zyronians scrambled to respond, calling in their elite security forces, preparing to face whatever new threat had emerged. But the force they confronted was not something that could be fought. Death had no need for weapons. He was a force, and now he was free. With a single thought, he reduced the Zyronian soldiers to ash, their bodies incinerated by his gaze. In the command center, the last surviving Zyronian officers tried desperately to regain control. They attempted to activate their backup systems, to rally their forces, but they were too late. Death had already taken over. The ship's command systems, once under the control of the Zyronian commanders, were now at the mercy of the ancient entity. With a casual gesture, Death disabled the ship's engines, sending it spiraling out of control. The Zyronians' desperate attempts to stop him were futile. Their weapons, designed to disintegrate matter on a molecular level, had no effect on him. His power was not something that could be measured or fought with conventional technology. It was simply beyond them. The more they tried to fight, the more they succumbed. In a moment of terror, the last Zyronian leader realized the magnitude of the mistake his people had made. Death turned his attention to the prisoners, those human criminals who had once been his fellow captives. They were nothing compared to the force he had become, but in their own way, they had the potential to serve him. They were fierce, cunning, and had survived the harshest of Earth's trials. It was clear that they would not fall easily. Their minds were sharp, their will to survive indomitable. But now, Death offered them a choice: submit or perish. And, to his surprise, some of them chose to kneel. Viktor Kalashnikov, once a ruthless warlord, stood defiant as the others cowered. The kingpin had built his empire through fear, manipulating his enemies with the skill of a master tactician. Even in the face of death, he did not flinch. His pride, his arrogance, kept him standing when others would have broken. "You think you can control me?" Kalashnikov spat, his voice low and unyielding. Death, amused by this defiance, reached out with a wave of energy. Kalashnikov's body trembled as he felt his very essence begin to fade, his life force being drawn into the cold void that death represented. But even as he felt the life drain from him, Kalashnikov's eyes gleamed with defiance. "I will not submit." With a thought, Death paused, and Kalashnikov's body was released from his grip. The warlord collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, his strength momentarily stolen. But Death did not kill him. Not yet. He recognized something in Kalashnikov, a fire that could be useful. "You are more than I expected," Death murmured, his voice like the rustle of dying leaves. "You will serve me, or you will perish with them." Kalashnikov, understanding the power of his position, nodded grimly. The others, including the infamous mercenary Carlos, the executioner Delgado, and the anarchist strategist Elias Moro, followed his lead. They had no choice but to align themselves with this force of nature, a being whose power dwarfed even their own. But they would do so with an understanding. While they served him, they were not slaves. They would survive and they would fight. Death smiled as he surveyed his new allies. The universe had not yet realized what had been unleashed, but it soon would. The Zyronians were gone, their empire shattered by his presence. Now, Death would remake the galaxy in his image. He would not stop until every being in existence bent to his will, until the stars themselves turned cold and dead under his reign. The ship was his now, and as it drifted through the empty void, Death's plans began to take shape. The galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy had felt Death's presence, and it was already too late. What had started as a rogue mission by the Zyronian hunters had now spiraled into the most significant existential crisis the galaxy had ever known. Death was no longer a distant entity, a myth. He had become a force, one that no civilization, no army, no technology could contain. The Galactic Councils, once proud and confident in their authority, were now scrambling to respond to the unimaginable threat that had been unleashed. The Galactic Council convened in haste, an emergency summit called to confront the crisis. The Council, made up of the most powerful species in the galaxy, gathered in their immense chamber, a structure suspended in space, encased in transparent domes of force fields. For millennia, they had governed in peace, keeping the galaxy stable through diplomacy, technology, and military might. But now, as the Council's leaders assembled, they all shared the same grim realization. Nothing in their collective arsenal could fight death. The Council was led by Lord Rakah, a battle-hardened Zyronian warlord with sharp eyes that could penetrate the darkest of voids. He had once been a respected figure among his peers, feared and revered for his cunning and ruthless efficiency. But now he sat at the head of a table, his once imposing presence diminished by fear. Death had already ravaged their empire. Their most formidable forces lay in ruins, their fleets torn apart by an entity beyond comprehension. "Our fleets are scattered," Lord Rakah said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Death is too powerful. Our weapons are ineffective. How do we fight a force that consumes all in its path, without mercy or hesitation?" "Perhaps we cannot," said Thalkai, an ancient being from the Kravenai species, who had witnessed countless wars, though none like this. His voice echoed with the weight of centuries. "This is not an enemy we can defeat with firepower or technology. Death has no form that can be torn apart. It is beyond the realm of our understanding." The room fell silent, the weight of those words settling heavily over the Council. Their greatest minds were trapped in a terrible paradox. How could they stop a force that had no limits, no weaknesses? But one figure remained calm, almost detached from the panic around him. Admiral Voss, a human war veteran and tactical genius who had once been regarded as a lone wolf among the Galactic Defense Forces, stood up. His scarred face showed no hint of fear. Instead, it bore the expression of someone who had already seen too much death. "We don't need to defeat death," Voss said, his voice cutting through the room. "We need to contain it. We need to drive it back long enough to stop its spread. There may be a way, if we can target its very essence." "You think we can contain something like this?" Lord Rakah asked, his tone incredulous. "We've already tried our best. Death's power bypasses every defense. We've lost everything already." Voss' steely gaze never wavered. "There's a relic, a weapon that can disrupt the energy field death is composed of, but it's not easy to acquire. It's hidden on the edge of the galaxy, in the ruins of a civilization older than any of us. We will have to face the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy to reach it, but it's the only chance we have." The Council members exchanged skeptical glances, but desperation pushed them forward. Voss had never been one to speak without purpose. If there was any hope, this was their last chance. With the decision made, Voss assembled a team of elite warriors from across the galaxy, each one a master of their craft. They boarded the last remaining Zyronian warship, a battle-scarred relic from the days before the Zyronian Empire's collapse. As the ship surged toward the galaxy's edge, the crew braced themselves for the perilous journey ahead. Among them was Morrow, a former anarchist strategist with a reputation for outwitting even the most well-prepared enemies. Alongside him was Delgado, a mercenary whose ruthlessness in battle had earned him the title Executioner. The team was a coalition of individuals who, like Voss, had seen the devastation of death firsthand. As the ship entered the desolate region of space, the once vibrant stars now dimmed in the face of death's expanding influence. The journey was not only a physical one, but a mental trial as well. The crew's resolve was tested with every light flicker and every dark cloud they passed. Death's presence could be felt in the very air they breathed, a suffocating weight that threatened to crush them. After days of tension, They arrived at the ruins of the ancient city, a place long thought to be a myth, its coordinates lost in the annals of time. The city was a labyrinth of broken monuments and shattered stone, a silent testament to a civilization that had been wiped out long before death had been sealed away. But there, deep beneath the rubble, lay the weapon they sought, the orb of luminal fire, a relic with the power to disrupt the fabric of death's essence. As they descended into the underground vault, the air grew colder, the darkness more suffocating. Strange creatures roamed the ancient tunnels, beasts forged by the remnants of this dead civilization. But the team fought on, each member relying on their instincts and skills to survive. It was in the heart of the vault that they found it, the orb resting upon an altar of stone. Its surface shimmered with an ethereal glow, its power almost tangible. But as Voss reached out to take it, the ground trembled. The walls cracked and groaned under the pressure of something far more terrible than any creature or trap they had faced before. Death had come. The orb's power flickered in Voss' hands as he turned to face the swirling darkness that materialized before them. Death had tracked them here, his very essence twisting the air into a suffocating void. His shadow loomed large, the space around him warping and bending as if reality itself was being torn apart. "Do you really think you can contain me?" Death's voice reverberated through the vault, a cold and mocking tone. "You are fools, thinking that your petty relics can stop me." But Voss, holding the orb, stood his ground. "We may not defeat you, but we can stop your spread." As Death advanced, the orb pulsed with a light that cut through the darkness, creating an aura of energy that crackled in the air. For a moment, the tide of power shifted. The team moved quickly, activating the orb's mechanisms, their only hope to hold back the tidal wave of Death's wrath. In that final, desperate stand, the future of the galaxy hung in the balance. Would the relic's power be enough to thwart Death's endless hunger, or would the universe fall to the dark force that had been unleashed? The battle for the galaxy's survival was only just beginning.